Regarding Residential Lease. You will utilize this particular form if in your contract A is selected. Except as disclosed in this contract, seller is not aware of any leases affected this property. After the effective date, seller may or may not, without buyer's written consent, create a new lease, amend an existing lease, or convey any interest in the property. Check all that apply. So this will be checked if there is a residential lease on the property. How would you know if there's a residential lease on the property? You're going to go to MLS. You're going to check the MLS, look at agent remarks, and generally the agent will tell you, hey, there is currently someone living in the property. So you guys know how to do that. Go to MLS. I'm going to just go to one of these right quick. You'll check MLS. You'll read thoroughly to see if it says anything. Go to agent remarks. Does it say anything about there being a lease currently on the property or somebody leasing the property? Attachments, that form might be in there if it does, but if you don't see it in there, you're going to assume that it's not on the lease. But if it is on a lease, the listing agent will definitely indicate that somewhere. If not here in the agent remarks, you'll see that there's a lease on the property, okay? Now, with that being said, let's pretend like this house has a lease on it. So we're going to go ahead and get this form out. We're going to put the address, street address, full 911, street, city, zip code, all that great stuff. It says residential lease means any lease of the property to tenant, including an addendum, amendment, or move-in condition form. So any documents you have in relation to that. Seller may not exclude any new residential lease or amend any residential lease without the buyer's written consent. Okay. Existing leases will have the following status at closing. You're either going to check A or B. So it's very important to know, if I saw there was a lease on the property as a buyer's agent, I would reach out to the listing agent and ask them, hey, when's the time frame on this lease, or when are they going to be out? Because a lease always supersedes a sale, meaning that if there's a lease on the property, the owner can sell the property, but in some cases, you can't just kick the tenant out if they have a valid lease that's still in effect. The lease is always going to supersede that sale, okay? So knowing when these people are going to be out, if there any money due to them, any security deposit, all that stuff, this is what this form is for and to help you with, all right? So you will check A if termination of this lease, meaning that once we go under contract, this lease terminates. Maybe you have somebody else on month to month and everything like that. Maybe this is the case. So this is what you'll check if once we close on the property, termination of residential lease. All residential leases must be terminated by closing. Seller shall deliver possession of the property in accordance to the paragraph 10 of the contract with no tenants or other person in possession or having rights to occupy the property. Notice, this paragraph will not amend or terminate any existing leases. Consult an attorney and refer to the residential lease for rights to terminate before agreement to this provision. Or you might select B, assignment and assumption of residential lease. Existing residential leases shall be assigned by the seller and assumed by the buyer at closing. So if this is the case where they're going to keep staying in there, this is what you're going to select. And you're going to, number one, you're going to check A, B, or C. Either A, the buyer has received a copy of the residential lease. Ideally, if you got a lease, and you have a lease that's on a property where you know it's going to have to be assigned, I would have a good listing agent would more than likely either have it attached in the MLS or ready to go as soon as someone asks about it. Or you're going to select where you are in the process when you're writing the contract. So if you got a copy of it because it's in MLS and attached, great, you're going to select this. If you don't have a copy of it prior to writing this contract, you might suggest one of these. So buyer has not received a copy of the residential lease. A seller shall provide a copy of the residential lease within 3 days after the effective date. Buyer may terminate this contract within, I would say, it should happen 3 days after the date the buyer receives it. So after you receive, you got 3 days to review it and cancel it if you don't like it. And get the earnest money back, refunded, okay? So you wouldn't do it too long. But again, this is all negotiable. You could put 3, you could put 5, depending on if, it's holiday, weekend. You want to think about these things, what's going on. but give your client some time to review it, but not too much. It shouldn't be 20. You shouldn't have that much time. So I would say anywhere between 3 to 5 days to 7 days to review it at the very max, okay? But you need to get that in a timely fashion. Now, here we go. Or you can select this one. Seller provided buyer with notice of the following oral leases, because this has been a different thing too. There's some oral leases where I told this person this. It's not in writing. So now we're gonna even they've added this since the last update of the form, where seller provides buyer with the notice of the following oral leases, or attaches exhibit identifying the names of the tenant, rent amount, and term. So you would put that here, okay? If it's not in writing. Number 2, it says at closing. So we're still under B. So at closing, seller shall transfer any security deposits, if any, to the buyer at closing. Buyer shall deliver to the tenant a significant signed statement and acknowledge that the buyer has acquired the property and is responsible for the return of the security deposit, and specify the exact dollar amount of the security deposit, except as described below, to the seller's knowledge for residential leases. The residential lease is in full force and effect. No tenant is in default or violation of the residential lease. No tenant has prepaid rent. No tenant has entitled to any offset against rent. There's no outstanding tenant claims against the rent involving the property. There are no pending disputes or any tenants on there are no pending disputes with any tenants or prior tenants, and there are no other agreements, options, or rights outside of the lease between the landlord and the tenant regarding this property. If any of the above are not accurate, you need to explain, okay? At any time any of this changes during the process, you will find out. Well, I'll just read it. Seller will promptly notify if seller learns that any statement in paragraph B3, I got dyslexia, y'all. So if any of this right here becomes untrue after the effective date, seller shall cure the condition making the statement untrue within 7 days after providing the notice to the buyer. If the statement remains untrue beyond the 7-day period, buyer may, as buyer's sole remedy, terminate the contract within 5 days after the expiration of the 7-day period. By delivering notice to the seller and getting the earnest money will be refunded. If buyer does not terminate the contract within the time required, buyer waives the right to terminate. The closing date will be extended daily as necessary to afford the parties their right and time to provide notice under this paragraph. So we kind of got that. This is only used when we got a lease, all right? Buyer will have their signature and seller. So if you have any other questions about residential leases, please let me know. But do remember, you need to contact the listing agent if you don't have it attached, or you have any more questions about the lease, or your client has more questions about this particular lease. You need to reach out to the listing agent, okay? Let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.